Is America truly the land of opportunity for all, or merely a colonial power that has systematically exploited its southern neighbors? Why do we celebrate certain immigrant stories while vilifying others? And how much of what we think we know about Latino immigration is shaped by political narratives rather than historical reality? These questions lie at the heart of understanding the complex tapestry of Latino migration to the United States. Far from the simplistic narratives often portrayed in media and political discourse, the story of Latino presence in America is one of profound historical depth, remarkable diversity, and surprising contradictions. Some Latino families have lived on what is now U.S. soil for generations before it was ever the United States, while others represent the newest wave of a centuries-old pattern of human movement across the Americas. Mexico, the borderland legacy. When 19-year-old Lucia Martinez crosses the busy Tijuana-San Diego border checkpoint each morning for her university classes, she walks a path that exists because of imaginary lines drawn less than 2 centuries ago. The border crossed her family, not the other way around. Her ancestors have lived in the same region for over 300 years, their identity transformed from Spanish colonial subjects to Mexican citizens to Mexican Americans, all without moving an inch. Mexico represents the largest source of Latino immigration to the United States, with over 35 million Americans claiming Mexican heritage. But this relationship defies simple categorization. The 1848 Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo that ended the Mexican-American War transferred nearly half of Mexico's territory to the United States, instantly transforming thousands of Mexicans into Americans. This historical reality challenges the very notion of immigration for many Mexican Americans. The ebb and flow of migration across this border has been shaped by economic forces, labor demands, and political upheavals. During the Bracero program, 1942-1964, millions of Mexican workers were actively recruited to address American agricultural labor shortages. Yet these same workers and their descendants would later be vilified in political discourse as illegal immigrants when economic priorities shifted. Puerto Rico, citizens in limbo. The tropical breezes of San Juan seem worlds away from the concrete jungle of New York City, yet these two places are bound by an unbreakable political reality. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory whose residents hold American citizenship. The second largest source of Latino heritage in the continental United States exists in a state of political limbo, neither independent nor fully incorporated. After the Spanish-American War in 1898, Puerto Rico became American property. Its people granted citizenship in 1917, just in time to be drafted for World War I. The massive migration of Puerto Ricans to the mainland, particularly New York, reached its peak during Operation Bootstrap in the 1950s and 1960s, when industrialization policies dramatically transformed the island's economy. Today, over 5 million Puerto Ricans live on the mainland, more than the island's current population of 3.2 million. Every time a Puerto Rican boards a plane to New York, Chicago, or Orlando, they aren't immigrating but relocating within their own country. Yet, culturally and linguistically, many experience the same challenges as immigrants, raising profound questions about American identity. Cuba, revolution and exile. Miami's Little Havana stands as a vibrant testament to one of the most politically charged migration stories in American history. When Fidel Castro's revolution triumphed in 1959, it set in motion waves of exodus that would transform South Florida and American politics forever. The Cuban story in America is one of distinct waves, each with its own character. The wealthy elite who fled immediately after the revolution. The freedom flights of the 1960s and early 1970s that brought the professional class. The Mariel boat lift of 1980 that saw 125,000 Cubans arrive in just 6 months. And the balseros, rafters, who risked everything on makeshift vessels during the economic crisis of the 1990s. Unlike most immigrant groups, Cubans received unprecedented support through the Cuban Adjustment Act and refugee programs, allowing for swift integration and economic advancement. This exceptional treatment raises uncomfortable questions about the political motivations behind immigration policy during the Cold War and beyond. Dominican Republic, baseball, and beyond. When Major League Baseball opens each season, nearly 1 in 10 players hails from a single Caribbean nation, the Dominican Republic. From Juan Marichal to David Ortiz, Dominican players have become legends of America's national pastime. But the connection between these two nations runs much deeper than sports. The tumultuous relationship began during the 31-year dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo and intensified after his assassination in 1961. Political instability and economic challenges pushed the first major wave of Dominicans toward New York City's Washington Heights neighborhood, now known as Little Dominican Republic. Today, nearly 2 million Dominicans call the United States home, with remittances from these immigrants providing a crucial economic lifeline for those left behind. The transnational nature of Dominican life, with constant movement between Santo Domingo and New York, challenges conventional notions of migration as a one-way journey. El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, the Northern Triangle. The harrowing images of migrant caravans traveling north from Central America have become politically charged symbols in recent years. Behind these images lies a complex history of American intervention, civil wars, and economic policies that have shaped migration patterns from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. During the Cold War, the United States provided military support to authoritarian regimes and counterinsurgency operations that displaced hundreds of thousands. The bloody Salvadoran Civil War, 1979 to 1992, alone created a massive refugee crisis, though many fleeing violence were denied formal refugee status due to U.S. political alliances with the Salvadoran government. In more recent years, gang violence, much of it exported from the streets of Los Angeles through mass deportations in the 1990s, has combined with climate change and economic instability to create new waves of migration. Today, over 3.5 million Central Americans from these 3 countries live in the United States, with their stories often reduced to political talking points rather than understood in their full historical context. Colombia. From conflict to community. Hidden among the diverse Latino communities across America is a rapidly growing Colombian presence. With over 1.2 million Colombian Americans, this group represents a migration story driven by South America's longest internal conflict and its aftermath. The decades-long struggle between government forces, leftist guerrillas, right-wing paramilitaries, and drug cartels drove professionals and business owners to seek safety in the United States, particularly in the 1980s and 1990s. Unlike some other Latino groups concentrated in specific regions, Colombians have established significant communities in diverse locations including Miami, New York, New Jersey, and Texas. What distinguishes Colombian immigration is its relatively high proportion of middle and upper-class professionals who often arrived with education and transferable skills. This pattern challenges stereotypes about Latino immigrants while raising questions about brain drain and its impact on Colombia's development. Peru and Ecuador. Andean connections. The ancient civilizations of the Andes have contributed their unique cultural heritage to the American mosaic through growing Peruvian and Ecuadorian communities. Together, these 2 Andean nations account for over 1.5 million Americans, with distinct migration patterns shaped by political and economic forces. Peru's migration story intensified during the economic crisis and political violence of the 1980s and 1990s, when the Shining Path insurgency and hyperinflation under President Alan Garcia pushed many middle-class Peruvians to seek stability abroad. Ecuadorian migration surged following the 1998-1999 economic collapse, when the country's banking system failed and the national currency was abandoned in favor of the US dollar. Today, Peruvian cuisine has become one of the most celebrated international food trends in American cities, while Ecuadorian cultural enclaves in Queens, New York, and throughout New Jersey maintain strong transnational ties to their homeland. Argentina. The European connection. Walking through certain neighborhoods of Miami or New York, You might encounter Spanish speakers with distinctly European features and cultural references, likely members of America's Argentine community. With approximately 300,000 Argentine Americans, this group represents a unique chapter in Latino migration. Argentina's immigration story defies many Latino stereotypes, reflecting the nation's own history as a destination for massive European immigration in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Argentina's population is predominantly of Italian and Spanish descent, creating a distinctive cultural identity that blends South American and European influences. Major waves of Argentine immigration to the United States followed the military coup of 1976 and the economic collapse of 2001. Unlike many other Latino groups, Argentines have typically arrived with higher education levels and have settled in metropolitan areas where their professional skills translate well. Conclusion. Beyond borders and binaries. The story of Latino presence in the United States resists simplification. It is not merely a tale of South to North movement, but a complex narrative of conquest, colonization, citizenship, exile, and economic interdependence. Some Latinos didn't cross the border crossed them. Others were granted citizenship without statehood. Still others fled regimes supported by American foreign policy, only to face rejection at the American border. As we peel back the layers of this rich history, we're forced to confront uncomfortable truths about American identity and immigration policy. Why have some groups received preferential treatment while others face systematic barriers? How have Cold War politics and economic interests shaped who is welcome and who is not? And how might understanding these complex histories help us move beyond the reductive debates that dominate contemporary immigration discourse? The Latino experience in America is not a footnote to American history, but one of its central narratives, a story still being written with each new arrival and each new generation. By understanding the diverse origins and journeys that have brought Latinos to the United States, we gain not just historical knowledge, but essential insight into America itself.